Hey there, this is Kamal, and in this video, we'll learn some of the basic Linux commands that you need to know as a developer. So, let's get this started. Okay, so before going further, let's first actually understand why we need to know these commands. So, as a developer, at some point of time in your career, you might need to execute some things which will only work on Linux. And at that point of time, if you don't have any idea of the file structure that we have inside of Linux, and also how to traverse your way through that file structure without any visual interface, then that will be quite problematic. So having a basic idea of all these commands will enable you to be a better programmer and also give you an edge over other programmers as well. And this skill of yours will be quite useful when you have to deal with servers and their maintenance. So if you want to deploy your code on your server and also maintain that manually by yourself, then you'll have to have a pretty good idea of the Linux operating system. And that is because most of the servers contain Linux as their base operating system. So if you connect to that server remotely from your own computer, then you might actually have to traverse your way through that file structure without any visual interface using just the terminal. So in this video, we're going to cover the most basic commands that you need to know and also some of the commands which will make your developer workflow a bit more easy. So without wasting any more time, let's jump into it. Okay, so the first thing that you need to have is the Linux operating system. And there are 4 ways that you can actually make this happen. The first way is to install Linux directly on your system. So just like how you install Windows, you can create a bootable drive with Linux on it and install that using that pen drive. So there are multiple flavors based on Linux, and by flavors I mean different operating systems. So based on Linux, they have created multiple operating systems. Some of them are Debian, Ubuntu, Fedora, Kali Linux and many more. So you can choose any of these flavors and install them on your system. And I personally prefer Ubuntu, and that's my personal choice. But if you want, you can go with any other operating system as well. So that's one way of doing this. The second way is to dual boot your system. So if you already have Windows on your system and you don't want to actually delete that partition, then what you can do is that you can install Linux alongside with Windows and you can dual boot that system to work with both operating systems. But if you don't want to mess with your storage or the files present inside your system, then the third way is to actually install Linux on a virtual box. So you can install VirtualBox on your Windows system or any other system, and inside of that VirtualBox, you can install the Linux-based operating system. So that's the third way. And the fourth and the easiest way is to actually use Windows Subsystem for Linux. So what this Windows Subsystem for Linux means is that you're going to essentially install a Linux-based distro, mainly Ubuntu or any other distro, directly inside of Windows and execute this Linux-based commands from inside of the Windows system. And you can make that happen using the WSL, which stands for Windows Subsystem for Linux. So the way that you set up this WSL is quite easy. I've already done a video on that, so I'll link that video in the video description down below. You can go there and check that out. So it's going to take only around 4 to 5 minutes to set that up. And if you're a beginner, then my suggestion would be to go with this option, as that would be the most easiest one. And once you're done with that, you can carry on from here. So as you can see here, I have my terminal open. And the first command that we're going to see is called as pwd, which stands for present working directory. So if you type on this and click on enter, it's going to show where we are currently present inside the folder structure inside of Linux. So currently I have a Ubuntu based distro called as Pop OS installed on my system. So inside this Pop OS operating system, we have a folder called as home. Inside that folder, we have another folder called as Kamal, which is the username of my account. And we are currently present inside of that. So we'll discuss more on the folder structure later on. But for now, let's actually try to see what are the files that we currently have inside this folder. So to actually see the files that we have, you can type in another command called as ls, which is going to list out all the files. If you type that in and click on enter, it's going to show that we have desktop, documents, downloads, and many other folders present inside this Kamal folder. Okay. So now, if you want to actually go into any of these folders, you can type in a command called as cd, which stands for change directory, then give a space and type in the folder name in which you want to enter. So let's say I want to go inside of projects. So I'll type in cd space projects, and what you can do is that you can just type in pro and type in on tab, and that's going to autofill that, then click on enter. So now as you can see, we have gone from this tilde option to projects. So this tilde represents our user account, okay, our home directory. So we are inside of that, and inside of that we have a folder called as projects, and we are currently present inside of that. So now if I type in pwd here, as you can see here, we are inside of Kamal, and inside of that we have another folder called as projects. So now if I type in ls, it's going to show all the projects that we currently have inside of this. And if you want to go back out of this folder, what you can do is that you can type in cd space 2 dots and click on enter. So that's going to move us out of that particular folder. So as you can see here, we are back again in the home directory. So now let's go back to the project structure once again. And in here, let's create a new directory. And the command to create a new directory is called as mkdir, which stands for make dir, which is make directory. So I'm going to type that in, give a space and give the folder name. So for this, let's give a folder called as test and I'll click on enter. Now if I type in ls, it's going to list out all the current folders. As you can see here, we have another folder called as test. So now let's go into that. So I'll type in cd space test and I click on enter. And if I list that out, as you can see here, we have nothing inside of test. So inside of this, let's create a new file. And to create a new file, there's actually two ways. The first way is to first create a file. And the command to create a file is touch space the file name. So touch is a command which you can use to create that file. So you can type in touch, give a space and give the file name. So for now, let's give it as test.txt. I'll create a text file and I'll click on enter. So now if I list it out, as you can see here, we have another file called as test.txt present inside the test folder. So now let's say I want to type some data instead of the test.txt. Then what I can do is that I can use a command line based editor. So as I mentioned earlier, currently we don't have access to the visual interface. So whatever data that you want to enter, you have to enter that through the command line. So there are multiple editors that you can use, but the most simplest one is called as nano. So you can type in nano, give a space and give the file name. So mine is test. So I'll type in test, click on tab and that's going to autofill and I'll click on enter. Then it's going to open an interface where you can type in the data. So I can type in. As you can see at the bottom, we have some options that you can use to actually save that file. So in order to save that file, we have to write it out. So in order to write it out, you have to type in Control O. So this upper arrow represents control. So you can type in Control, then O. Then that data will be written to that particular file. So as you can see, the file name to write is test.txt. So you can click on enter to confirm it. I'll click on enter and that data will be written to that file. As you can see here, wrote one line. Once you're done with that, you can exit out of it. For that, you can type in Control X. As you can see here, we have Control X here, right? So I'll type in Control X, then we'll exit out of that. So to simplify this, what you can do is that instead of actually creating that file first, you can directly use nano, then test2.txt. So let's create a new file. I'll click on nano test2.txt and I'll click on enter. And right now we are inside of that file. Let's type in something and I'll click on Control O. When I click on that, it's going to ask for the file name, that is test2.txt. I'll click on enter, then I'll click on Control X. So as you can see here, we didn't actually create the test2 beforehand. We directly used the nano editor to actually create that file, then add some data and also save that file. So now if I type in ls, as you can see here, we have these two files called as test.txt and test2.txt. Now, if you want to actually see the data that is present inside this test.txt, then you can just use nano to open that file. Or you can use one of the command called as cat, which is going to show that data present inside that particular file. So now let's type in cat, give a space, test.txt. So as you can see here, it's going to type in hi, this is Kamal. Okay, so I have a spelling error here. Okay, let me change that. So now if I type in cat, and one more thing is that you can cycle through all your previously executed commands using the upward arrow on your keyboard. So if I click on the upward arrow, you're going to cycle through all the commands that you have previously used. So let me go to this cat test.txt. I'll click on that. It's going to output that data. But the problem is that this cat will only work if you have some limited data present inside of the file. If you have a large quantity of data and you want to actually scroll through that, then you can use another command called as less, and then you have to give in the file name. So it's going to show the data present inside this and you can scroll through this. And once you're happy with that, you can click on Q and it's going to exit out of that. So now let's list it out once again. And now let's do one thing. Let's actually delete this particular file that we have. Let's delete the test2.txt. And the way that you can delete that is you're going to type in rm, which signifies remove. And then you can type in test2.txt. Click on enter and that file will be removed. So now if I type in ls to list it out, as you can see here, we only have one file called as test.txt. Okay, so before going to the next command, let's first clear out the screen. So as you can see here, there's a lot of data inside the screen, and right now we're at the bottom of the screen. So what you can do is that you can type in clear, click on enter, and that is going to shift it to the top and everything on the screen will be cleared. So now let's list it out once again and let's go back a directory. So I'm going to type in cd space 2 dots to go back one directory, and let's list it out once again. Now let's delete this test. So in order to delete this, what you can do is that you can type in rm space the directory name, it is test. But if you execute this, what's going to happen is that it's going to show that we cannot delete this because test is not a file, instead it's a directory. So in order to delete this, what you have to do is that you can type in rm space hyphen capital R space test. So this capital R refers to recursively. So what it means is that it's going to go inside the test folder, it's going to recursively delete all the files present inside that folder, and then it's going to delete that folder. So that's what's going to happen. So if I type in that and click on enter and list it out once again, as you can see here, the test folder has been deleted. So it's actually quite difficult to remember all of these extensions that you can provide to a particular command, right? So for this remove, we have hyphen capital R. So in order to simplify things, what you can do is that you can open the manual for a particular command. So each and every command that you're executing right now has a particular manual associated with it. A manual is just a description of that particular command and all the expressions that you can attach to it. So let's say I want to get the manual for RM. So I can type in man, which stands for manual, then give a space, type in RM and click on enter. That's going to show the name of that particular command, its synopsis, its description, and also all the available options that you can give to it. Okay, so you can open that, read through this, and then you can execute that particular command. And in order to go back out of this, you can type in Q and you'll exit out of that. So let's say you are somewhere deep inside the project structure and you want to directly go back to the home directory without typing the cd command multiple times. So for that, what you can do is that you can type in cd and click on enter, and automatically you will go back to the home directory. So if I list it out, as you can see here, we are currently inside the home directory. So wherever you are inside the project structure, you can just type in cd and you'll be redirected to the home directory. So now, as I mentioned earlier, we have some extensions to all the previously executed commands as well. For example, for the list command that we had previously used, we have another extension to it called as -a. So what it's going to do is that it's going to list out all the hidden directories present inside this particular folder. So ls is going to list out all the visible directories, and ls-a is going to list out all the invisible directories as well. So these directories and files are generally used by the system and all the other softwares, which are not necessarily needed by the user to be known. So these files are currently hidden. So in order to actually access them, you can type in ls-a. Similarly, you have another command called as ls-l, which is going to list out the read and write operation permissions given to a particular user as well. So I'll not be getting into this because this will confuse quite a lot of people. But what this signifies is that in a simple sense, this represents the read, write and execute operations and permissions given to a particular user. Okay, that's what it signifies, and you don't need to know about that. But if you want to know about this, then I'll link a blog post in the description down below, which is going to explain these things in more detail. So you can go there and check those out. Okay, so now let's clear the screen out. Apart from this, you can also move and copy files between different directories. So let's say we have a file called as test.txt. So let me create that. So let's say you want to rename this file. Then what you can do is that you can type in mv, which represents move, and then type in the file name, which is test.txt, and give the new file name. So for now, let's give it as test2.txt, and let's click on that. Now let's list it out. As you can see here, we have a file called as test2.txt, and this folder doesn't contain the test.txt because once it has been moved, this file will be deleted. Similarly, let's say you want to just copy the data present inside this test2.txt and don't want to delete that. So for that, the command is cp space the file name test2.txt, and let's move the content present inside test2.txt to another file called as test3.txt. So if I list it out once again, as you can see here, we have another file called as test3 and also test2 is present. And if you had any data present inside of this, then automatically that data will be copied to test3.txt. Okay, so with this, we are done with the basic commands which are present to any Linux based operating system. So using these commands, you can traverse through the project structure and easily execute and delete and do any of the operations that are previously mentioned. So now let's see some of the commands which will be useful for you as a developer. So before going for that, let's first actually understand the project structure which is there at the root directory inside the Linux operating system. So as you can see here, we're currently present inside the home directory, right? So if we go back one directory, we'll be inside the home. And if I go back one more directory and list it out once again, we'll be inside the root directory. So this root directory represents the starting point of your Linux file structure. So you can't go back from this, you can only go forward from this. So we are currently inside of that, and all our files are present inside the home directory, which we had actually seen. Apart from these files which are visible to us, some other files which are specific to this operating system are present inside these other folders that we currently have here. So you don't need to know each and every file or folder present here. You just need to know that these files are present inside your root directory and you have access to them and you can make changes to them as well. But one thing that you have to keep in mind is that as a user, you won't have access to make any changes inside of these particular folders. So as a user, you only have access to make changes to any file or any folder present inside this particular folder, that is your username defined folder. But all of these folders are present outside of this particular user folder, right? So if you want to access any of these, you have to become a super user or a root user. And the way that you actually do that is using a command called as sudo. Sudo gives us the ability to execute any command as a super user. So you can type in sudo, give a space and type the command that you want to execute, and all of that commands will be executed as a super user. And as you're a super user or a root user, you have access to all the files and all the folders present inside your system completely. So now let's go back to the home directory, and for that you can type in cd, click on enter, and you'll go back to the home directory. And if you want to go back to the root directory, which is defined by slash, you can type in cd space, give a slash and click on enter, and you'll go into the root directory. Okay, so that way you can go and switch between the root and the home directory. And one more thing is that you can use sudo and give a space, type in -s, and it's going to ask for your password. And once you type that in, your account permissions will change. And as you can see here, previously we were executing all the commands as a user called as Kamal, but right now we are executing all the commands with the name of root, which defines the super user. Okay, so any command that you execute right now will be executed as a super user. Right now you don't need to actually type in sudo before any command, as you're already the super user. So now let's exit out of it. So you can type in exit and click on enter, and you'll go back to the user account. So one more useful command is which. So you can type in which, give a space and give a particular package name. So for now, let's use the Visual Studio Code. So I have that installed on my system. So the command for that is code, which signifies the VS Code. I'll click on enter, and this is going to give me the location of where this particular application is present inside my system. So currently this code is present inside the bin folder, which is currently present inside the user, and that user is present inside the root directory. So there's some more commands that you need to know. One of them is ifconfig. So this ifconfig is going to list out all the devices currently connected to this particular network. So apart from this, you can use another command called as stop, which is going to list out all the currently running processes on your system. So this is similar to the task manager that we have on a Windows based system. Okay, so let's close that. Let's click on Q. Okay. And one more thing is that if you want to stop any process which is currently being executed, you can just type in Ctrl+C and that particular process will be halted. Okay, so let's say you're currently in the process of downloading a package and you don't want to download that. You can just type in Ctrl+C and that particular process will be interrupted and it will be stopped. And when it comes to installing packages, it changes a little bit depending on the operating system. So right now I am on a Ubuntu based system. So I can type in sudo, which is going to give me the access as a root user. Then type in apt, which is a package manager used by Ubuntu. Then give a space, type in install, and then you can type in the name of the package that you want to install. So this package manager changes depending on the particular operating system that you're using right now. So Pop! OS is a Ubuntu based distro. So apt is a package manager handling all the packages for Ubuntu based distros. So that's why I have typed that in. But if you're using some other distro, you can just type that in the Google and know which package manager you have to use and execute that particular command. So now you can type in that and click on enter and that particular package will be installed. Okay. Similarly, you can type in sudo, give a space, apt, give a space, update. That is going to update your system. And once updating is done, you can type in upgrade, which is going to upgrade all the packages as well. So before winding this off, there's actually two more commands that you need to know. The first one is chmod, So this chmod or chmod gives you the ability to change the read and write permissions of a particular file or a folder. So as I mentioned earlier, you can type in ls-l, which is going to list out the read and write permissions to a particular file or folder. So you can change this so that this particular user can only read from this particular file or only write to this particular file. So you can do that using chmod, give a space and give the particular command for that and give the file name. So this is the syntax for that, and I'm not going to delve into this because if I explain this, it's going to make this video much more complicated, and as a beginner you don't need to tinker with any of the read and write permissions. But if you want to know more about this, as I've said earlier, I'll link a blog post in the description down below executing all these advanced commands for you as well. So the last command that we're going to see is ssh space username @ host. So what this does is that it's going to establish a connection between your current native system and a server which is present remotely some other place. Okay, so the syntax starts with ssh, and then you have to give the username of the account that you have on that remote server and give an @, and this host is going to define the IP address of that particular server. So let's say I have bought a cloud server from DigitalOcean, then that particular server is going to have a host name, and you're going to set an account username and password right for that. So you have to type your username for that particular account on that system, give @, and you have to type in the IP address. So you can type that in and click on enter. Then this is going to ask the password for that particular account. You can type in the password and click on enter. Then this system will be connected to that remote server, and you can execute all those commands that you've seen just now inside that server from directly inside your native system. And that brings us to the end of this video. So we have seen all the basic commands that you need to know as a developer. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you have liked what you've seen till now. If you did, then please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.